"I've been arrested. You need to go on a walk. My mate is coming over to get some of my things. Until he does, Emma, don't go home." Imagine picking up the phone at just 17 years old and hearing that. For Emma Grede, this wasn't some dramatic scene from a movie, right? This was her actual reality. She's standing in this gray 10th floor concrete dump of an apartment in East London. We're talking no stove, literally no fridge. It was a moment of just absolute terrifying chaos. But, as you'll see, that very moment would ultimately become the launchpad for one of the most incredible entrepreneurial ascents of our time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are looking at an unbelievably inspiring journey. We're going to unpack exactly how a young woman went from sleeping on a couch in a council flat to earning a coveted spot on the Forbes America's Richest Self-Made Women list. And we're diving into this together because what we found here isn't just your standard success story. It is a highly practical framework for engineering your own reality, completely regardless of where you start out.
We're pulling the core principles directly from Emma Grade's powerful book, Start With Yourself. We are totally bypassing all that typical, fluffy business advice you hear all the time. And instead, we're extracting her fiercely tested framework for hitting incredibly ambitious goals. So, if you've ever felt like you just don't have the right connections or the right background to make it big, well, you are in exactly the right place.
Section 1. A Call from the Abyss. So, going back to that chilling phone call, there's this really profound contrast to look at. On one hand, you have immediate chaos. Emma's friend Marcus is literally on his way to spending 22 years in jail. She's 17, she's completely alone, and she's out there dodging mysterious contraband collectors. But then, look at the other side of the coin, a secured future. Because before everything went down, Marcus actually made sure the rent on that flat was paid up for years in advance. He had this immense, unwavering faith in her potential. And that gesture forced Emma to a pretty stark realization. She realized she was standing right on the edge of an abyss, and she desperately needed to build a bridge from her current chaotic, violent world to the secure, successful one she actually envisioned for herself.
Section 2. The East London Operating System.
You really have to consider the massive gap between expectation and reality here. If a fortune teller had looked at Emma's life on paper back then, the predetermined path was honestly bleak. It was become a DJ's girlfriend, a footballer's side piece, or marry a gangster. Sadly, that was the expected script for women in her neighborhood. But instead, what happened? She became a multi-business founder and a self-made multimillionaire on the Forbes list. She actively chose to rewrite the script, pushing back against every single rutted expectation that usually leads to a financial dead end. It is ultimate proof that your starting environment absolutely does not have to dictate your final destination. Now, how did she actually start rewriting that script? Well, it all started with this incredibly profound piece of wisdom from her mother, which goes, "You're not more special than anyone else, but nobody is more special than you." And look, this isn't about arrogance at all. It's about completely rejecting victimhood. Emma integrated this so deeply. She realized that looking around for external factors to blame for her unstable life, it was going to get her nowhere. She had to take total, uncompromising self-responsibility. Why her? And more importantly, why not her? Tracing her early hustle is it's exhausting in the best way possible. At just 12 years old, she's already working a 5 a.m. paper route. And this wasn't just to scrape together 30 pounds a week. It exposed her to the grafters, the people up at the crack of dawn, putting in the hard work to get ready for real jobs. It instilled this lifelong, highly guarded morning routine in her. Then in her teens, she's side-hustling designer shirts and Fendi bags that miraculously fell off trucks to her teachers. By 16, she actually drops out of fashion college because she's already the top retail salesperson across the street, just ruthlessly closing store credit card accounts that literally nobody else wanted to sell.
See, her background wasn't a weakness at all. It was her ultimate asset. This sort of unwritten East London manual gave her a massive edge. In her world, your word is absolutely king. You don't lie, you don't flake, and you certainly don't cheat, because the consequences on the street are very real. So when she eventually entered the corporate world, which is, let's face it, a place filled with people making empty promises and feeling entitled to success without doing the actual work, she was operating on a totally different, vastly superior level of integrity and execution.
Section 3. Bridging Vision and Reality.
Obviously, she needed a place to direct all that hustle. While working in fashion show production, she quickly identified what we can call the fashion chasm. She's surrounded by these creative geniuses producing shows for top-tier designers, but she realized a glaring issue pretty fast. These brilliant artists were going completely bankrupt. They were dropping 150,000 pounds on extravagant runway shows, driven entirely by sheer artistic ego, but they had absolutely zero merchandising plan or return on investment to back it up. They knew how to make beautiful art, but they had no idea how to build a business. Emma saw this massive gap, and she knew she could be the bridge.
But right before we hit that major turning point in her career, we've got to look at this childhood premonition, because this is wild. Living in total chaos as a kid, Emma used to cut up Vogue magazines and compulsively draw this very specific scene: a huge, beautifully decorated Christmas tree right next to a handsome console table. 20 years later, she's sitting in the very first home she bought with her husband, and she looks up and just bursts into tears. The actual room she was sitting in matched her childhood drawings detail for detail. She always trusted those visions in her mind's eye, knowing they were basically signposts for a future she just had to figure out how to reach. So, jumping back to her career, the result of that hustle eventually led to a staggering disparity. Emma takes her realization about that fashion chasm and starts securing massive sponsorships for designers. She literally calls up Toshiba, convinces them to sponsor a young designer by building a wall of TVs, and casually demands a 20% commission. She was bringing in millions of pounds in revenue for her company, but her salary was stuck at a meager £26,000 a year. When she finally went to her bosses to renegotiate her worth, they offered her a deeply insulting £4,000 raise. In that moment, the choice was crystal clear. She quit. Because she realized if she could build an empire for them, she could definitely build the whole shebang for herself.
Section 4. Dismantling the old thoughts.
Let's systematically break down these toxic old thoughts that hold so many of us back. First up, the idea that you need to know the right people to succeed. Complete fiction. Emma knocked on doors and wrote literally hundreds of letters until they finally let her in. Second, the myth that money is somehow inelegant, unspiritual, or dirty. Look, money is a tool for freedom, and wanting it is completely valid. Third, the dangerous illusion that doing it all is perfectly achievable if you just balance your work and family life correctly. Emma unapologetically rejects this cultural programming. There is no true, clean playbook for women to do it all. You just have to write your own.
I think this quote perfectly captures her entire mindset. I don't have time to wait for equity. I'd rather make it. I mean, is the world fair? Absolutely not. It is typically much, much harder for women, people of color, and those from impoverished backgrounds. And Emma, she was all three of those things. But waiting around for the system to suddenly become equitable, that's a trap. You've got to get on your own team. You have to engineer your own life rather than sitting around waiting for permission.
Section 5. The yearly vision process.
So, how do we actually turn all this mindset inspiration into a concrete blueprint? Well, Emma doesn't just dream. She creates rock-solid systems. Enter the Emma at 40 blueprint. She writes down these decade-based visions for exactly how she wants to spend her time and what she wants to achieve. Then she works backward from that 10-year goal into yearly, monthly, and weekly chunks. But the real secret sauce is this. She keeps that master list on a simple sticky note on her phone, and she checks it every single Sunday. It's brilliant. This ensures she isn't drifting off track and is constantly aligning her daily habits with her ultimate destination.
Furthermore, every September, she runs through this brutal but deeply necessary yearly process. Step 1, you look back at the goals you didn't achieve and ask why. The catch? Absolutely no external blame is allowed. You must look in the mirror. Step 2, identify 3 things you wish you did more of. The things that actually give you joy or purpose. And step 3, and honestly, this is the toughest one, what are you avoiding? What are you truly terrified of doing? Because you have to shine a light directly on your fears in order to dismantle them.
I want to leave you with a really provocative thought today, derived directly from Amazon process. Ask yourself, what would you do if you didn't give a shit about what anyone would say? Seriously, if you stopped living by other people's predetermined scripts, what kind of life would you engineer for yourself? The blueprint is right there. The rest? Well, the rest is entirely up to you.